discussing the idea of the false binary.
What an illusion of choice does, it establishes the baseline assumptions that nobody questions.
This is part of the fifth generation warfare that we've talked about. Voting for the lesser of two evils. Definitely an emotional, psychological trap that people are in.
You're cheerleading for an insane ideology because you think you're winning.
The role we have as media, how do we help everybody understand this is theater and you need to get back into the real world?
If you're opposed to the agenda, you should oppose it regardless of who's selling it to you.
Okay. Hello, everybody. Merry Christmas. This is the 14th or maybe 15th IMA panel, and we're doing a live Q&A with questions sent in from our collective audiences. I'm not sure if anyone has a question that everybody wants to get off of their chest or a Merry Christmas they want to say before we get started.
I just want to thank you, Kit, for setting this up. I love the idea of a Q&A.
Okay. Well, I do have one question, which was
and Merry Christmas.
There's a delay.
Okay.
Oh, man.
I have one question that was sent in. This is my favorite question, which I think will be a good thing to get us started, and then we can go as feels right, basically. It was sent in by Kim B. And she says, with all the problems facing us right now, if you could Christmas wish one thing away that would make everything else easier, what would it be? And I think that's a good question.
I'll start, maybe. The algorithm.
Well, actually, we should discuss this. Okay. I mean, we can jump in. Yeah, wherever.
I just wanted to bring it up because we had our last chat, I think, with a digital ID, right? And about our lines in the sand. And
right.
in my gated community, they installed a biometric exit and entry system. And I'm moving next month.
Merry Christmas.
So Merry Christmas to like how fast things have come. So anyway.
Wow.
Well, good on you, man. Put your money where your mouth is, right? I mean, seriously, that's but biometric entry exit, that's a huge step. That's wild.
Yeah.
I would say
just to get in your house.
Yeah.
To get into your neighborhood.
That's wild.
Yeah.
I would just say in general, I mean, I kind of laugh when you ask the question because, I mean, I think people who watch your audience is probably like, man, there's probably like one of three things that they're all going to probably say. I mean, I think quite obviously the direction, I mean, maybe I don't want to make it just like technological development because I think that's a little bit overzealous and irrational, but in general, like the direction of the technocratic control, like to be able to just somehow stop this rapid, like I'm going to post an interview today I had with 7Cs yesterday about the, what we're seeing this 6G step. By the way, Derrick wrote an article I'll put up today on that as well. And that the what that will cause. We were discussing like the potential to like mesh human bodies with nanotechnology. And it's just like that. It just terrifies me. How do you stop something like that? So to me, it would be to somehow just put an end immediately to all the stuff that goes in that direction for the sense of control of the human population.
Blade Runners.
Well, and I'll throw it to you.
Yeah, which way are we going? Are we going round it?
Whoever's up.
I would, if I had a magic wand and I could wish the world was a better place and it would happen, mine would be just to get for people to lose their belief in the legitimacy of political authority. If they could just get over that hurdle, and if they could just realize that they're responsible for everything, that would be great. And I think we could start moving in a better direction then.
I take mine back. I want yours.
I'll add one to this. Well, I love what Iain just said there. I would just say, if there was one thing I could wish away, it would be, I guess, coming from the other direction, the apathy that I tend to see about all the things that all of us talk all the time. Like, for example, like most people aren't going to switch neighborhoods if biometric entry exit happens. They're just going to go along with it. Most people aren't opting out of the facial recognition at the airports, et cetera. We could go on and on. I wish I could wish away all that apathy and see, more of a fire lit under people's butts and get them to some sort of action. I don't know what action, protesting the streets, et cetera. I know there's some of that, but at least just more more movement, more concern, like verbally being expressed. Like, I mean, as far as I'm concerned, if in a more perfect world, there would be businesses and individuals and people plastering it everywhere. You know, like how we used to love to change our profile pic for the latest trend of whatever, you know, no digital ID, businesses putting up, we're not going to implement digital ID. We're not going to require biometrics. Just like, you know, get rid of the apathy and bring in more open resistance and vocal resistance.
I would have the magic wand waved to go back in time and make sure that each and every current tech nerd and oligarch that hates humanity and wants to imprison and enslaves us got to kiss a girl when they were 15. And maybe this inevitable dystopic hellscape would be avoided altogether, because they'd be like, you know, I actually had a legitimate human interaction before I could purchase one. I think I have a different outlook on humanity.
You can definitely purchase kissing girls.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Is that everybody? Is everybody
Yeah,
done?
but it's better when you don't, isn't it?
So clearly Ian's got quite a delay, so we can just remember that for going forward. That's like a 30-second delay. But I mean, Ian, what you said, I just want to add, it's like, when I was juggling my thoughts right there about the few things, one of them was obviously like, you know, like kind of what the reverse of Derrick or what you were saying, like just completely just allow everyone to see the lie of government, or maybe even just no longer believe the lie that government has authority. And I went with the other because it's just so pressing. But when you really think about it, if everybody just stopped believing in the authority of government, none of these things would be happening. At least I would think so. So I think that was probably the one that makes the most sense to me. I appreciate that one.
Yeah, I think we hit the trifecta, and everyone brought up the good points. Like in Mexico right now, here next month, they're making the announcement we're going to have 3 to 6 months to register our Mexican digital ID. First, go and get it, and then go to our mobile SIM provider and register it. If you don't, your SIM will be shut off. Now, here comes into what you guys just mentioned. If enough people in Mexico, just like last time, do not do it, then it doesn't happen. So
I love an article, really quickly, Derrick, an article you wrote about a little town that basically just decided to no longer comply with the government. And then I don't know if that still exists, but that's everyone do that.
Oh, it's definitely still exists. Yeah, I was just I'll chime in there, not to take us too far down that road, but yeah, I'm here in Mexico with you, brother, and I'm working on that. I know we talked about it privately. I definitely want to collaborate with you on it. I've been connecting with some some Mexican groups like the Network for Digital Human Rights, and there's one or two of them. Article 19 is another, who are actually trying to. Most of them, they're filing amparos, they're filing like lawsuits basically to try to stop it. But even like just getting more pamphlets, more flyers in Spanish, and putting them out in public places, because I think they will have trouble rolling it around all of Mexico. Mexico City is screwed. Like, they're going to do it there for sure. But the small towns up in the mountains, I think it'll be much longer for that to actually happen, if it ever does. But again, back to like awareness, I just think that most people, especially the young generation, like for example, there was the protests in Mexico. There's protests of Gen Z protests all around the world that I know we all have questions about. But I haven't seen a single one of them that's focused on digital IDs or biometrics. They're talking about corruption and other things, but there's not in the younger generation an awareness about why they should even be concerned about digital IDs and biometrics. So that's something that I'm trying to work on here in Mexico, is getting more information in Spanish and just trying to reach out to people and find those who actually give a shit so we can do something about it, because I refuse to accept it.
And I'd just like to give a shout out for an event tomorrow in the UK, in London, outside BBC, which is W1A11, I think. No, that's not right. But it's if you look at massnoncompliance.com, the details are on there. And it's a protest that I'm attending, and I don't normally attend protests, precisely because it is not a protest against the government. It is a protest to encourage mass non-compliance for the rollout of digital ID in the UK. So if you're in the UK and available to go and can go, please do attend that, because it's important that, as Derrick was just saying, that and Hrvoje was saying as well, that we do not comply with this, because that's our first line of defense. If we don't comply, that should hopefully give us enough time to then pursue the other means of resistance, such as lawful challenges and legal challenges and so forth, because they take time. But here in the UK, certainly the plan is to pretty much have us all subject to digital ID by December 2027. So we haven't got a lot of time. And the government's got a massive majority. And despite the fact that many millions of people have voiced their concerns, the government doesn't have to pay any attention to that because it's got such a massive majority. So, we really need to, mass non-compliance is our only, is our first line of defense in the UK at the moment.
That'd be a nice Christmas gift, wouldn't it?
I'll just append my answer to that to make one thing disappear. It's a rather boring answer compared to everybody else's, but mine would be censorship, all forms of censorship. If everything is free-flowing, I think all the other problems take care of themselves, basically. If they can't lie and they can't stop other people telling the truth, things will resolve itself beautifully. That's my answer. Does anybody have a question that wants to go next, or should I take one from the list again?
I got one that came over my way. I mean, it's maybe a little bit more what we're used to talking about. I know we have some more interesting questions we'll get to, but I'll just throw this one out. Somebody on my channel said, can we discuss the biodigital medical convergence that the Babylonian banksters have in mind for us? I guess if anybody has thoughts on that.
Can we discuss it? We do very little else.
Right. Well, I'll jump in first. Just
pretty much all we do.
It was just on my mind. This is, obviously, I think all of us are this, prime. Like this is what everyone I think is starting to realize is happening all around us, and it's what in different ways collectively we've all been trying to break down. I was getting into the, the future of it with the nanotech and the meshing and all of that. And I just think that what they're truly planning is what we're all highlighting, which is the centralized control through the lack of, really, if you overlap it with the network cult state discussion, which I think is very much where they're trying to push us into this like reimagining society. This is the Great Reset. It's ultimately about that kind of lack of ability to influence the outcome of what's happening, but to a level that I think it's like removing autonomy. Like that's like the real level it goes to, not just surveillance and coercion, but to a point to where like when you get into like neuroscience kind of stuff, it just gets, this is like what I was saying before, like it's, what do you do to fight something like that? And I think that's genuinely what their mind is pushed to a place to where it's not even relevant whether we care or not, whether we push back, which is terrifying. And I mean, that's extreme. That's like where I think it's driving to, and incremental steps are happening now.
I'm seeing questions in the feed. We can maybe just pull some of those. Like, I like this one. How do we know Steve isn't a replicant?
What do you mean by replicant? I saw that in the chat earlier.
Later
you're muted, Steve.
That's Tease.
Yeah.
Tease is funnin'. And if the bit is from AM Wake Up because I turned my camera off to give my girl a smooch before she takes off while I'm on the air because I don't want to make the audience vomit. And it's out of respect, and she doesn't want to be.
And replicant is from Blade Runner, bioengineered humanoids.
Ah, got it.
Yeah.
Well, let's get into some of the fun stuff. We can always come back to the stuff we always talk about. So let's get into some of the weird stuff.
I'm gonna work up a little weird at a time. The next one isn't weird, but it's not. It's a nice question. Whatever happened to the promise of the internet and the democratization of politics? And do you think it's too late?
It's never too late. It's getting late, but it's never too late.
Mm-hmm. Well, so the question is, go ahead.
No, and it was. No, well, it was never. Let's be clear. It was never designed to be a free and open internet. It was designed to be a control system. But it's been a double-edged sword for them, for no doubt, because human beings, if you give a human being a tool, they'll start using it for however they want to use it. So the possibility that the possibilities that the internet raises for us to have truly free and open communication is still definitely there. And it probably isn't going to be this iteration of the internet, is it, that's going to take us there, because this is the DARPA control system version. So we have to reinvent it. Whether we go, how far we're going to go with Web 3.0 technology, where that's going to take us, who knows? But it will be us that makes it so that their only option really is to shut it down. We can use this technology for our own benefit. We just have to get on and do it.
Iain, do you think that the cypherpunks were naive or fooled, or the people that, for those who aren't aware, like the movement that was in the 90s, even before modern internet, but definitely at the beginning, that was very optimistic, that believed that it was going to be democratized and it was going to revolutionize, and with the caveats that we all know, DARPA, et cetera. Do you think that they were naive, or what are your thoughts on that, the cypherpunks' vision?
I think they saw the potential, and and I think that they were genuine and serious about the same with Satoshi's white paper, isn't it? I mean, it was a product that a lot of people think, obviously, that it was a product of the intelligence agencies, but and it's certainly, if there is a secret encrypted backdoor, then that would be the case. But I mean, nonetheless, the notion of how we could use decentralized distributed technology is a good one. It's not a bad idea. And so I think that the intention probably was honest and everything that it was claimed to be. But that is not how, obviously, as we know, that is not how the internet is being used by those who control technology. And I think that's the problem. The problem is technology is controlled by investment, and it doesn't. And so one of our solutions probably is to properly diversify that investment, and to probably crowdfund more stuff, and so people would have to put their hands in their pockets for things that are important to them. But if they do start doing that on a bigger scale, then people can hopefully get the investment they need to create the kind of real decentralized communication networks that we need.
Adding to that point, kind of the other way around. Interesting. I'm of the mind that I think that this was designed as something that was not for the benefit of us to push back against the government that have created it. I just don't think that. I think there's more nuance to it, clearly on the side of control. But I think what's interesting is, if you look to where we are now, if we didn't have this, how in the world would we be fighting what this is today, right? So in an interesting way, it kind of became that, whether it started like that or not. And that's interesting, not in the full vision as it was to begin with, but this is giving us the ability to be able to do this and fight back today. And I don't think that's what was planned as. So interesting way to think about it.
I'll maybe just add as well, because there was another related question in the chat. Is anyone working on a workaround for when the web or individual news sites is switched off, something not reliant on ICANN, net names, old school bulletin boards? I recently, and I agree with you guys, I think this was a military project, DARPA, from the outset, the internet, but it has allowed the cat was let out of the bag, and it has allotted a lot of people freedom. And so, as you guys said, the game isn't over yet. They're working on that trajectory. I recently interviewed John Sneeson, who's up in Canada, and he's working on something called the Outer Net. So it's a way for people to connect directly, eventually, without the internet. So people are working on stuff like this. And I had a great guest who I met in Croatia this summer, who's working with Croatian political parties. They actually set up a council on anti-technocracy. His Substack in English is called notesfromtechnopoly.substack.com. But he made a point where when they created this system, they allowed sort of a public space of freedom for us, which we're using now. And so what they're trying to do now with the EU Digital Services Act, all that stuff, is trying to fix that little rupture. So that's what they're attempting to do. So we have this freedom now, and now they're trying to cordon off those back doors and exits. And that's what we're really in the thick of that fight.
Yeah, that's exactly what I would say. I mean, the question is, whatever happened to the democratization? And I would say, oh, you already had it. We had it. And basically everything since about 2010 has been them trying to shut it down. Like the Wild West days of the internet really were the Wild West days of the internet.
They took the democratization of the internet and they threw it on eBay.
Right. I think we even had it a little past 2010, Kit. I would say because my experience with independent media, as far as the current independent media, really started I think I first started writing 2012, blogging and getting paid 2013. And then you had Free Thought Project, Anti-Media, you had Click, you had Mind Unleashed.
Yeah, it wasn't I wasn't saying things changed 2010, just that would be when they started to address the problem. That's when you started seeing
definitely started to mess with us. Like we could see we would I remember the team, we would go, I can't remember what website, but we would look at CNN's analytics and other websites, and we would look at our analytics behind the scenes on Facebook, and we're like, we're getting 100 million views per week. We're kicking CNN's ass. And then honestly, it was right around the time Trump comes on the scene and starts saying fake news, fake news, fake news. And then, of course, by 2016, Russia, we're all labeled Russian disinformation, everybody from Corbett to all the different pages. And then the purges start happening, right? So I feel like the really end of that wild, wild west was definitely, 2010. And then just the first few years leading up to 2015, there was still some of that reach. And now everybody who I know, whether I know them personally or I see them online, who's getting 100 million or millions of views, is people who I would very much question whether or not they're legitimate or being paid or getting $7,000 checks or otherwise. While people like us who are doing great work are, we hit a peak from time to time, but it's still a struggle to get beyond that algorithm.
I would just in conjunction with all of that, there was the adpocalypse. There was Gamergate in 2015. There were all of these different things that radically shifted the way that YouTube was moderated, the way that you could put out content. They were, even pre-COVID, they were yanking channels for questioning the election.
Dude, that's a really interesting thing I just talked about the other day. Do you remember right before the COVID-19 chaos on Facebook, it was kind of a tail end or a continuation of what you were just discussing, Derrick, but there was this really crazy focus, almost nobody really made sense of it, on keto and like health stuff. And like, remember all the disappearing holistic doctors? Remember that whole story? Like right before this happened? I mean, I know there was a lot of
there was a whole bunch of stuff like about the wellness industry and
exactly. And I think
linking it to the far right grifting somehow. It was mad.
Well, there was definitely people that were like, there was a story to discuss about some of these doctors, but then it became like 90 missing doctors. All the, the claims were being scooped into anything, but there was a story there. And as usual, I think it was because there was something that was turned into a partisan sideshow, and that's why it got dismissed. But think about what happened there. They shut down, these million follower Facebook pages about alternative health and outside the mainstream right before we were here. It just seems like that's really, hard to miss. But it's just a small part of that larger story. It's obviously about trying to shut down momentum. But what's interesting is by doing that, they kind of scattered it and almost made the problem worse, I guess. But it's hard to tell with all the crazy mainstream alternative media stuff, But interesting connection. If we're going to go to another question.
I think one thing. Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead, please.
Just very quickly, I mean, I'm a total technophobe. I can't even use StreamYard, so I don't actually know what I'm talking about here. But I have seen, Pete, I was watching a fascinating discussion online the other day, and people were talking about doing things like using Raspberry Pis to set up Tor routers connected to these I think there's like satellite radios. So you don't, they piggyback on any network, on any kind of phone network. So people are already constructing ways to access the internet totally without through any kind of the kind of connections that they want to force us to use. So I think if the more they squeeze people, the more of these kind of solutions, whether that will work or not, as I said, I've got no idea, but the idea is there. People are already working on it. So the more they squeeze billions of people, the more billions of people are going to come up with solutions. So it's not
just mention
definitely
Portal
not
in that. I just mentioned Quarto in line of what Ian's talking about. I'm not paid by them or anything like that. I am trying to collaborate with them. I know them. They're going to be speaking at our event coming up. But Quartal, QORTAL.dev, if anybody's interested, they're one of the projects. There's other people. Somebody mentioned earlier that they're coming up with ideas like Decentranet, or people who are essentially trying to create the new internet, which does still baffle the mind to a lot of people, because it wouldn't be www. whatever, but it would still be using a browser, using some type of digital technology, but to access information that is existing out there, floating in this thing that we call the internet, but not controlled by ICANN, as you already mentioned earlier, and others. So there still are many ways. It's just, again, that idea of the original internet being democratized. We all got kind of corralled into like, oh yeah, World Wide Web, that's the internet, right? But really the internet as an idea is much more vast than that. And so it's just like with many things, those people like Quarto and others, if they don't get support in terms of users and financing, they tend to kind of come and go. So those of us who care about these things need to promote them, need to use them, need to support them how we can.
Well, on Ian's point, which is a perfect segue into what the question I was going to propose that was one of the recent ones, and Derrick's addition, the question, which kind of overlaps with a lot of this, is do any of the panel members think we can deter the rollout of 6G, and how do we mitigate the horrendous effects physically and otherwise? Now, just the rollout of 6G is when all of what you just discussed, in my mind, is going to take place. So that's the worry, is that that's all going to bring it together. Really quickly, though, to the decentralized internet, Odyssey, at least I agree, it's been an incredible amount of time and nothing's really happening yet. I'm hoping it still comes to pass, but they're arguing that's what they're building, right? Some kind of a decentralized idea. Holochain, interestingly, which is a crypto project, is sort of deviated, but they were trying to do something like that too. It's got a lot, it's much more mainstream connected, and I'm not advocating for it, but it's an interesting, there are projects like that out there. So I agree that should be striving forward. But to the question, again, reiterate, do any of the panel members think we can deter the rollout of 6G, and how do we mitigate the horrendous effects?
I mean, you can push back on it in your community, but it's a little bit more invasive than the 5G was. Like, I live in a town in the North Bay area in California that disallowed 5G towers, which is pretty cool.
What does that mean, disallowed? Like
they won't let them be built within city limits.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And I will say that is very rare. I would love to know more about that, Steve, to send me, because maybe there's a model or a template for other people. Because Ryan mentioned my article, which will be out after we wrap up here, and it's about 5G and 6G. Trump this is one of the areas he doesn't get enough credit, and I mean credit in a bad way, from all the people who worship him, that he, for everybody who's concerned about 5G, whether it's health-wise or surveillance or just smart cities, Trump has been the one who accelerated it during his first term. He was calling for 6G back in 2018, and he's continuing to promote this. I don't know if we can stop it, because unfortunately, besides maybe, like I said, the model with whatever happened in Steve's area, because the FCC, since 1996 in the US, when they passed the Telecom Act, they built it into that act, which was, when we were still pre-smartphone era, they built it into that, saying that local bodies, you can't resist it based on health concerns, based on environmental concerns. The best you can do is say it's going to lower property values. It's going to, be ugly. So then they'll turn it to look like a cactus or something like that for you. But literally it says in the law that you can't, and I've seen this. I've gone in Houston, where I'm originally from, gone to the Tower Commission, seen people say they're building a tower 10 feet from our church, 10 feet from our school. And if you even bring up health or anything like that, they just don't even, sorry, disqualified. You can only argue with these very limited kind of range of arguments. And the article I'm writing about today is how now the FCC they introduced 15 new bills. They introduced a new rule where people have until the end of this month to comment. And if that goes through, that will basically remove any more local voice when it comes to the state level, to the local body. And so, they're saying we're going to get rid of onerous regulation, which again, I'm not for government regulation in most areas, right, but this is definitely an area where they're using that free market argument to just shove 5G and 6G next down people's throats. So, I mean, I don't think it looks very good. But for anybody who cares and believes your voice matters on that, you have till December 31st in the United States to comment to the FCC if you want.
I didn't even know about that. I mean, I knew they were doing that, it would surprise me the government's trying to, not care about our health. But I was editing his article today, and it blew me away. Like, it's literally written that you're not allowed to consider, paraphrasing, the health and environmental concerns when passing the, rolling this stuff out. And in one part, Derrick also added was the point that essentially with the what do you call it, the shot clock, where essentially if they don't respond as like the state level to a proposal, it automatically gets rolled out. I mean, it's just like that's so obvious what they're doing. They're clearly trying to just force in what they want, no matter what we think. That's everything Trump's administration is doing right now, like to an extreme degree, just saying one thing, doing the opposite. And again, that's why I think most people are starting to see through it. But I agree with Derrick. Sadly, I think it's going to happen whether we want it or not. But it doesn't mean we should not be fighting. The time to push back to stop it would have been 20 years ago, 10 years ago, that Senator Blumenthal clip where he goes like, so we're basically flying blind then, no studies. Everyone's like, okay, now we knew about it, but we should be fighting this tooth and nail because we can stop how it's used and roll it back if we continue to fight in the right direction, in my opinion.
Jason Basler, who was supposed to be here this morning and then got called away last minute, has a great tweet out right now. I'm just going to read it off real quick. He said, just to piggyback off of Ryan's point about the Trump administration here, he says, in just 1 week, Trump has signed $1 trillion defense bill, pushed 6G for 3D surveillance, hijacked a Venezuelan oil tanker, exempted AI firms from state laws, sent $650 million to Israel and another $800 million to Ukraine, given BlackRock Ukraine rebuild contracts, and it implemented the biometrics and 5-year social media check at the border. So this all, of course, goes to establish the America First agenda, right? That's what we're doing. That's what that means. I'm not sure. Words don't mean what they used to in 2025.
The AI regulation thing's unconstitutional. Period. Go ahead, please.
The 5-year social media thing is hilarious because I'm in Britain and we have now laws, ridiculous laws about social media, and all the people that were saying this is fine, this is fine at all, are railing against Trump's 5-year social, as if it's not just basically exactly the same thing.
This is fine. That meme with the burning house down. That's exactly what comes to mind. Wild.
Yeah, I mean we've got a situation in the UK at the moment where what we can say online is not controlled by primary legislation. It's not even controlled by secondary legislation. It's controlled by what they call tertiary or quasi legislation, which is basically whatever the Secretary of State tells Ofcom to say, which is the regulatory body in the UK for the Online Safety Act. So it's not even a legislative decision. It's just a phone call from the Secretary of State to Ofcom to say, this is what we want you to bung in your regs. There's not even any pretense that this has got any kind of, even representative democratic oversight of it. It's just a do and say what we say or else. That is all it comes down to.
Maybe if I could just add to that, going back to what we were talking about censorship and what you're bringing up now, the Online Safety Act stuff, as well as another question that was in the feeds for Ian. Mr. Iain Davis, your conversation with Gareth Ike on Bring the Fire was great. Do you still think building parallel societies is the way to go? I think it's like we don't have a choice. And what we're seeing, like with Substack now, a year and a half ago, I left TNT Radio and I said, I'm going to try this for the first time ever, full-time podcasting. And Substack was my lifeline, right? And just 2 days ago in Australia, the Online Safety Act, people are now on Substack. Certain users are getting you have to give up your biometrics to some company based in San Francisco. I think it's called Persona or something. And I just can't imagine that feeling, like to log in, I got to scan my face. Like it's insane. And so what do we have to do now? So now I'm working on a contingency plan. Some people have already left Substack. This is part of that parallel society thing. I'm still going to stay on. But now I'm like, you know how much energy this takes? Like I spent $5,000 remaking my website in January 2022, doing the membership integration, getting banned on PayPal, moving the Substack, moving the list. I'm not a technical guy either. Now it's like, okay, I'm going to keep Substack, but I'm going to also make a membership thing on the website because sooner or later, we might be screwed. So we got to keep adapting and building these parallel systems. And it's a cat and mouse game.
And you always, no matter what, you always lose some, and that's the plan, right? They keep shoving you, and you people then come and find you. But there's some that maybe signed up on a whim, or they're tired, they don't want to look, and that's the game. They diminish. 2 steps forward, or run. I guess it would be 2 steps forward, 1 step back, over and over and over. It's frustrating. But I do want to. I would like to reiterate the physical health side of it as well. Let's do both. Like the parallel societies is a very important conversation. But I bet here in this conversation somebody might have insight into so 5G and like mitigating the health effects other than like tinfoil around your whole body, or the house being fitted out with what I forget what the term is, but the meshing. Anyway, anybody have any thoughts on the health side of it?
I mean, I try to just wire up as much as possible. Like right now, I'm talking to you guys on my laptop, but I'm wired in right now. I'm not on. Me too. I have the router, but everything is running through like the old school phone lines, plugged into an adapter in here. We do it for our phones too. So if we're like, for example, if my partner, if she's sitting there on the phone, there's no reason to be on the Wi-Fi. We have a little adapter she can plug right into. So I mean, it's little things that do take a little bit of rewiring ourselves and our habits, but for people who really care about it, then it's worth it. And I see there's people in the comments talking about being EMF sensitive and stuff. Yeah. And I mean, that's, we probably all are to some degree, but there's some people who literally, if they walk into, let's say, an event space and everybody's got, or a church or anything like where there's a lot of people in one space and everybody's got phones in their pockets, they can't even be in there for more than a couple minutes. I definitely empathize and sympathize with those people, because it's how do you exist in the world around you? Because for 5G and 6G to exist, the U.S. government has said it itself, and it applies everywhere else, that they have to install these towers literally every 100 to 200 feet in order for this network to operate the way they want, to have this beautiful future with robots and driverless cars and all this stuff. So if you're extra sensitive to that, you can do what you want in your house, but the idea of even going outside is really difficult.
Yeah.
I think ultimately the only solution in that case is you have to leave the cities. Like I recently interviewed Shannon Rowan, which is exactly what she did. And there's really no other solution. I mean, you can use that paint where you paint your wall. Sure, it blocks from your neighbor's Wi-Fi and they've got curtains, and maybe you can mitigate it to an extent there. But ultimately the cities are, the urban ghettos, smart city ghettos.
I mean, I'll be honest. Into my approach to 5G and 6G has always been, there's only so much I can think about. I don't smoke, I don't drink, I've got to die of something. Bluetooth will get me in the end, I'm sure, but...
Do you use Bluetooth headphones, Kit?
Far more than I should.
Yeah. Do you ever get headaches? I mean, I don't ever use them at all. Like, I'm wired right here, but I've got,
I mean, that's the thing. Like, I absolutely
fall asleep
do
with
get
them in their
headaches.
ears.
I've got headaches like my whole life for various different reasons, and if I have a headache already, I can't use Bluetooth headphones because they will absolutely make it worse. It's just
you might
true.
You might want to look into the many patents for manipulating brainwaves through those exact devices. Legitimately, I'm not kidding. Like Apple has.
I don't know what you're talking about. It doesn't write about everything.
I don't see it.
Do you want to move on? Should we move on to the next question?
I get like tinnitus real bad and just ringing really, really bad. Like I typically have to sleep with a fan on just so I don't like all night have that.
Let's get weird, Kit.
Yeah, let's get some.
Okay, this actually isn't a weird one. This is a more personal one. It's a friendly one, and I thought everybody would appreciate a chance to share a bit of background. What have we got? Where is it? It is from Chris J, and he asks, what was your red pill moment? What event would you say opened your eyes and separated you from the normies?
I've spoken about this before, so I because I mean that is a question that I've had quite a few times. I don't think I had a red pill moment. I can't think of it. I mean, there was one conversation that I had with my partner who she said, you do realize 9/11's a load of rubbish, don't you? And I remember that sticks in my mind. But I think it was more of a kind of gradual process, really. So I don't think personally, I don't think I had a moment. I think I sort of was looking at information. I read Brzezinski's The Grand Chessboard, and I remember that kind of having a massive effect on me, because I thought, blimey, there are these people that that treat the world like a thing that they can manipulate. And that was a moment. But I was quite young then, so I mean, even then I didn't. So I would say for me personally, it was a process rather than a moment that happened.
I got a copy of Behold a Pale Horse in like 94. And I had a bunch of people in my life that were much older than me. And so I've been like this like pretty much my entire adult life. Yeah. And a little bit before.
I'd agree with Ian. It's a process, but for me, 9/11 was my initiation in the early 2000s, and basically understanding the concept of states terrorism, state crimes against democracy, as the late Lance DeHaven Smith called it, false flag operations. And then understanding that and then seeing them everywhere, it's like, whoa, so.
Yeah, that was the thing. I got Behold a Pale Horse, and like 6 months later, it was Oklahoma City. Waco.
Right.
I was like, what?
Falling down the hole. I'm piggybacking on, like, I agree with Ian to a degree. I think that, it's a gradual process for me, but I do have a moment that I've noticed, like, with, like, I've talked about this many times in the past. I've always been like, when I was younger, I was very much a contrarian. Like, yeah, tell me what, do something. Oh yeah. Why? Just because, authority telling me to go sit down. I don't want to sit down. But then as you grow up, it becomes more of a, not just disagreeing to disagree, but wanting to understand things and pushing back. But that's, that was the starting point for me. So I was already ready just to disregard, push back. But cannabis for me was what I've always talked about as a real turning point. And I graduated high school 2001. So it's kind of like right before that and after, when I was kind of, experimenting and so on, and ultimately came to understand that we were lied to about a lot of this stuff, alcohol included, even though it's terrible for you, alcohol rather. It's still something that it was like, it didn't just like end my, all the crazy commercials and so on. And so when I dove into cannabis from that point forward, then maybe a few years after that, really doing like the interesting research, finding out that it was like this interesting kind of connected point. Like I've talked about many times, my website started about cannabis law reform and the lies about the medical side and everything. And then it expanded to like, wow, look at the foreign policy overlaps. Look at and then it became what it is today. And so, but I think cannabis really, when you really realize how, like, the simple point, like them telling you it's a Schedule I drug, but then finding out they're giving it for medical purposes to people, like on open medical, experimentation. And, how can that make sense? And so I opened that door, and then just same thing, realized just every possible thing. But 9/11, I think as well, for most people, that really did change a lot for me from that point forward. But the cannabis was the starting point.
I also had hip hop and punk rock telling me not to trust the government, and that they were flooding the streets with drugs and stuff like that. And, I'm serious. Like, that was very, very, very informative. And then you would go to shows and you'd meet people from like Food Not Bombs, and they'd have a whole bunch of, literature and stuff like that. And I mean, it really was an education, at least late 80s, early 90s for sure.
Yeah, I'll definitely say music played a major role. Like Ian, I do think it's been a process. Like, looking back, so I just turned 41 last week, and I can see that there was the rebellious me who, like Ryan said, just didn't trust it or listen to authority. I didn't like just being told what to do. And that goes back to being a curious mind. And I remember asking my mom or, my parents questions, and they'd say, that's just how things are. That's just the way it is. And I was never like, what the heck do you mean that's just the way things are? So that would always be dissatisfactory for me. And then being a rebellious teenager, listening to punk bands, listening to metal bands. I used to listen to Fear Factory. They had a song called Freedom or Fire. That's all about just like, like it sounds like it was about self-immolation and about the Buddhist monks. But a lot of the language there was just like, don't trust the government. And I used to listen to this band called Dying Fetus, this death metal band. And I remember being in high school, and one of their lyrics is, the media is a tool designed to drug us into slaves. And just how those things, like, even though I didn't think about it too much, I was like, oh, okay, that sounds cool. Later on, looking back, I'm like, oh my God, these were all kind of planting the seeds that I needed. And then for me, it was getting locked up at 20. That was a big kind of shift of life. Like, all right, I need to reevaluate everything. And then I became a felon through that experience. And so being a felon and all that goes along with that, it caused me to start questioning the criminal justice system, the drug war. And then eventually, within 1 week, I found Ron Paul's book, Revolution Manifesto. I watched Jones's old documentary, Endgame. And then I was listening to another metal band called Molotov Solution that had lyrics about the Federal Reserve. Like all these things kind of converged at once to, actually start thinking. It went from just being the rebel without a cause that was like, yeah, screw authority, to then actually like, maybe I should actually understand what's going on behind the scenes.
Really quickly on the music side of it, I've had a few different, like even like Bob Marley, for example, early on, like, pushing back and power, but Immortal Technique for me, whatever, the reality is of, I'm sure people disagree on what his intentions are, completely opened my mind to tons of stuff. Like I remember listening to those, multiple albums and just kind of going like, his rant about, I mean, I can go off on it forever, but there's so much information within all of his, just what he puts out. It's crazy. And so that was one that really did open my mind to things that I had no idea about at that time.
I mean, I would agree. Generally speaking, it's a process. I mean, I was actually, weirdly enough, I was asked this question for the first time just a couple of days ago in an interview. And then the next day I got this question, an email, and I realized what I said in the interview was completely wrong. The story I told in the interview was that when I was 9, I stayed home from school because I hated going to school, because I was just like that. I think probably everybody here hated going to school. And I was looking through my parents' videos to find a movie to watch. And I watched their copy of Oliver Stone's JFK. And it was like, wow, people can just lie and they get away with it. And that was kind of but the more I think about it, the more I think the very fact that that movie was even there for me to watch suggests that I was already, basically, I was a born in covenant red pill. So I would really credit my parents with it. And I should have done that in the previous interview. And yeah.
Someone mentioned George Carlin. I just want to throw some credit to Carlin for him.
Oh yeah. George Carlin, Bill Hicks, Norm, Patrice O'Neill. All these guys did a lot to shape my worldview politically, much more than any like pundit or any particular like political journalist.
Carlin especially. I mean, like it really pisses me off, because you will see people now saying, "Oh, Carlin, if he was alive now, he'd be so woke." Carlin was not. He was not a Democrat. Okay, he just wasn't.
I never heard somebody say that. That's crazy to me.
I'll tell you what, man, what I saw happen to comedy during COVID made me say out loud more than twice, I never thought I'd say this, but I'm glad George Carlin isn't here right now, because I don't know which way he would have. Yeah, really.
I feel like with you, it's a fair point. Who's to say what when you grow older, even more older, but his whole thing was sort of like, like he was like the early calling out the partisan, like not necessarily partisan, but just
exactly.
And so I
called out the political correctness for sure. Like,
he would have picked up anything,
super grumpy and super old, like at the end, like there.
Okay. Yes. But I've noticed a particular trend with comics, and particularly comics of a certain age, where now that it's Trump that's the bad guy, there's this default to all of the anger that they had against Ronald Reagan, and only the right are the bad guys now, and they're just incapable of thinking critically and getting past that particular paradigm. And I'm not saying 100%, and my show is dedicated to St. Carlin, St. George. He is a patron saint of the show. I vividly remember the first time I heard Class Clown, and it's a formative memory. But I don't know.
Well, I share your concern though, Steve. I'll just say real quick, just that whole adage about like never live to meet your heroes, something along those lines. Because I worry about that too. There's a lot of people I've been inspired by who are all deceased, and I'm like, dang it, would they have sold out if they were still alive? Who knows, right? And also, it is a fact that for better or worse, Carlin was more of a leftist. I mean, his politics definitely leaned left, and if he stayed around, maybe that would have played into some of the things you're talking about, Steve. But I will say, you can find this one We Are Change. I don't remember which city it was, but it's on YouTube probably. If you just look up We Are Change and George Carlin. And it was definitely like at the last year of his life, I'm pretty sure. And they went up to him and it was at like a book signing or something. They said, "Hey, Mr. Carlin, what do you think about 9/11?" He's just like casually like, "What do I think about 9/11? Well, the same people who lied about JFK are lying about 9/11 and the truth's never going to come out. Both parties cover up." So I do think he definitely understood, even if his politics were left, that both sides of the political equation were corrupted and controlled.
I'll add one point though to almost sort of adapt my stance on this, because Steve, you made an excellent point, and I would argue exactly what you highlighted is actually like a tailored, targeted social engineering campaign for people exactly like that, right? Like it's designed to get that kind of person, whatever they're vulnerable to, later on. Same with the COVID-19 thing. Like we all saw people who were like a complete different person when it became like, oh, I might die because this thing's here. All of a sudden, their entire principle went out the window. I think it was designed in many ways like that. So, but I think I would still stand with Derrick on. I'd like to believe, we'll sleep with that, that he would stay true to what he was saying right there. But so psychological operations are pretty powerful. I'll add lastly what T said, and now the comedy scene is the new Laurel Canyon. Just even.
I'd even say the podcast scene. And I just want to add along these lines, Alex Jones, and we were talking privately in the chat, Jazz Coleman of Killing Joke. And I showed you guys I sent you guys the clip. Some of you hadn't even seen it, where Alex Jones, I mean, I'm still trying to understand the psychology of how you do such a 180, where Alex Jones was doing a show with Patrick Byrne last week. A subscriber sent it to me and I cut the clip where he's like, yeah, we should regime change Venezuela. And they literally say to make it into a digital governance state with blockchain and biometric ID accounts. And I'm like, wait, you taught me to fight the globalists and now you're promoting globalism. And then Jazz Coleman, I did a little write-up on this a few weeks ago. I saw Killing Joke perform in Chicago, I think in 2003 for their self-titled album where they had anti-New World Order songs, and this is what I kind of like Jazz. And yeah, I know he's into the occult, but now he's doing he's doing a score for Aleister Crowley, and he was commissioned, I just discovered this in 2019, by Lutz's Trust, the Luciferian Theosophists, to produce a song for their great invocation. He wrote a Gnostic Mass, and you can actually go to their website where he penned a missive in 2019, Jazz, and he's basically saying, yeah, I'm down with all of this. We're going to be herded into 21st century smart cities, into this technocratic synergy and planetary one consciousness and world federation. And I'm like, and he's like, UN is the way to go. And I'm like, what is happening to all these people?
I think the greatest and funniest example of that was COVID hitting and Rage Against the Machine coming out with actually maybe don't rage against the machine. Meanwhile, Right Said Fred are out there raging against the machine.
Heck yeah. The Right Said Fred dudes were heroes.
I wonder, I think to Hrvoje's point, I mean, like I said, Jones helped wake me up a little bit in the beginning. I was always skeptical of him because I could tell he was like sometimes a little bit hyperbolic with his claims and things, but I think Bill Cooper was right. And maybe he's been an op the whole time. And also just the comedy thing, I don't think any of the current crop of comedians are funny. And I don't need to name names because they can be friendly. And some of us have been on their shows here and there, but I'll name one, Dave Smith, some others, like these people that are comedians. I don't think they're funny at all.
There's some absolute killers right now, but the vast majority of them are mediocre to clown shoes.
There's that one Palestinian dude that's blowing up right now. He's pretty funny.
Sammy Obadiah.
Yeah, we have a
Great.
in the UK we have this thing called Edinburgh Fringe, right? Edinburgh Fringe, which is supposed to be so you can understand that the kind of comics that you get on kind of light entertainment, mainstream kind of TV and stuff like that are pretty lame and pretty tame. But the Fringe is supposed to be a showcase for up and coming comedy talent. And so you should somewhere in there, and in the past they've had comedians that are really, really quite challenging comedians that perhaps he's not known in the US, but people like Frankie Boyle and stuff like that who are really kind of challenging to listen to sometimes. But there's just I was listening on the radio to quite a few of these comedy Fringe kind of sets, and there was just nothing critical in their comedy. It was so bland. There was no anger. There was no kind of social commentary. It was just, and I was thinking, wow, is this the up and coming generation of comics? Because if so, I mean, obviously comedy is a subjective thing. And just because I didn't find it funny doesn't mean that others won't. But it was just, there was just no. I mean, you expect a comic, don't you? When you think about Carlin when he was in full flow, to really kind of make you think about the commentary that they're making, that it has real kind of social resonance, and it really punches you in the face and makes you laugh. But this stuff now, the new stuff, is awful. Maybe I'm just getting old, I don't know, but it was just rubbish.
I mean,
I agree. Before we get past the Alex Jones point, I just think it's, Steve and I've talked about this a lot, and I think the reason that these things are worthy, and it's not some like a, people tend to frame it as like a, divisive thing. These people are the mainstream media. They have more reach and more influence than most of these mainstream platforms today. So it's like it's a weird little game they play where they are that kind of powerhouse and influencing people's opinions. So we need to call these things out. And I think the Bill Cooper point is very important, and I think it very much was from the beginning. I remember pointing this out. I can't remember the exact moment it was, but there was an example where Jones was at like an event, and of course you could argue that it was like his own personal security, but it was a while ago, and he's at this event and like something randomly happened. There's no one near him, and somebody does something to him, and like these people come out of nowhere, like these agents, and like protect him and get him out of the way. And I'm like, and that just stuck with me, going like, what was that about? And so overall, and that's just a personal insight, who knows if that means anything. I believe that he very much has been playing a role the entire time, and it could be a level of kind of just willful ignorance to not want to see where things are coming from. But we can't look at where we are now and what he was doing before and not acknowledge that this is a very clear pulling of the punch, right? You're not calling out globalism. You're not calling out technocracy. You're leaning into these things. I mean, when the New World, the North American Union got literally proposed as the TechNate map, and they were like, rah, Trump, and didn't even call it out. It's just like that stands out more than anything to me. So, and it's not just him. There's plenty of them, and I just appreciate that point. I'm going to talk about Hrvoje's tweet about him later, because I can't believe he came right out and said that they want technocratic regime change in Venezuela. Blows my mind.
I've never been much for they replaced him with a bot, or they replaced him with a clone, or they replaced him with a lookalike thing. But if you told me that they had for Alex Jones, if you could prove it, I would be like, yeah, actually, that makes sense.
And maybe I'll just add, I mean, to Derrick's point, I think he responded in the chat saying that at the end of the day, China and the US, NATO serve the same people and are all working towards technocracy. And I'm just going off of open source, what's already out there. I was on TNT Radio, and I think I was the first to interview Carl Jha, this Chinese guy, on TNT Radio. Then he got his own show on TNT Radio. Now he's got his own show on UK Column. And someone sent me a tweet he did a few weeks ago where he was actively, openly promoting 15-minute cities.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm like, what the? I literally live in a 15-minute city, and they've installed biometric exit and entry to my house. I'm like, how is this a cool thing? This is not a cool thing. And so, yeah. And was it Steve who said that, Laurel Canyon 2.0, a lot of the alt media space is effectively, I had a long chat with John Klizek, and, when you see Laurel Canyon 1.0, it's the military occult intelligence networks that created the whole sex, drugs, and rock and roll. It seems like they've moved into, you saw rock and roll sort of died, right, in the 2000s, just as the internet was getting online and social media. And it's like the alt media podcast space has become the new grounds for Laurel Canyon, 2.0.
Right.
Me and not to just real quick, me and Wheezy, shout out to Wheezy from the What Is Truth podcast, did a show almost 2 years ago that we titled Laurel Canyon 2.0, and we went heavy into the whole Rogan sphere and a lot of the Matthew North stuff, and then we did some like sort of deep dive analysis on a bunch of the other people in that, what the intellectual dark web kind of thing. Yeah.
To your point, though, about the larger, it's clear that they have fallen for that trap. These people who were fighting the Great Reset and everything else are in many ways supporting it because Trump tells them something else. But this is the important overlap that,
or they get paid.
Exactly. But that's always been there. It's more than ever today. But the network state point, the Freedom City, the 15-minute city, the smart city, the charter city, this is exactly the same conversation. And this is proven at this point that the same funding from Phenomenal's Capital going through, they're the ones funding the push of Freedom Cities. Even Roger Stone, actually in January, discussing the whole Honduras Prospera overlap with his pardoning of Hernandez, who's the guy who literally put Prospera, which is one of these hellscape technocratic cities. Literally I just lost my train there. Roger Stone said in January that we need to save Prospera or rather save Honduras and Hernandez to save the Freedom City in there. And he literally called it that. The point is that when they were proposing this is what they're talking about. Peter Thiel petitioned Donald Trump to have Greenland be one of these freedom cities. And that's what really drove the idea for Trump reaching out for Greenland. This is what we're talking about. And so for people that want to praise this, who were moments ago telling you, or even, by the way, still, that's weird that he said 15 and, it seems to be contradictory, but there's plenty of them that go 15-minute cities, smart cities. That's the left thing. Great reset. We fight that. But Freedom City, Trump, rah, rah, rah. And they're just not aware or don't care that it's the exact same agenda. I just think that's really important.
Yeah, the great irony of Mark Anderson, who wrote, he published the Techno Optimist Manifesto from Anderson Horowitz, is probably the biggest kind of tech investment venture capitalist firm in the world. He wrote this thing, the Techno Optimist Manifesto, in which he said, we are accelerationists. And when he meant we, he meant himself and the gaggle of Silicon Valley oligarchs that have funded and put Trump in the White House. And he was openly talking about saying that the things that we oppose, he listed a load of ideas that they supposedly oppose. So they supposedly oppose global overreach. They supposedly oppose the WEF. They supposedly oppose, sustainable development. They're against all these kind of ideas. Then he disingenuously said that the reason that they oppose them, that all these ideas were communist. They're not. They're stakeholder capitalist ideas, but nonetheless, that's what he said, and that's the message that had been, I think, kind of part of the message that had been packaged up and sold to the American electorate prior to the last election. But the thing is, when you look, as you were quite rightly saying, if you look at what like, for example, Thiel is doing in Pronomos, well, there was an interview the other guy with, I've forgotten the guy's name, but the guy that is leading on the development of Prospera. And he initially said that Thiel, I can't remember the guy, but he initially said that Thiel hadn't put a lot of money into it. Well, Prospera is most certainly in Pronomos. They've only got a few things in their portfolio, and Prospera is one of the things that they've got in their portfolio. And then he said that it's not really a do as whatever you want, freedom to unregulated, do whatever you want place. It's not really about that. And then a bit later in the interview, he said Thiel is investing in nanotechnology research in Prospera. Precisely because he can do things and invest in the kind of research that anywhere else in the world would be illegal. So he admitted that. Then you get the notion of this freedom city concept, which is basically special economic zones. That's what they're talking about. And as you quite rightly said, if you look at the charter city movement, which is back with the charter cities, the notion of putting all these kind of deregulated zones where oligarchs can have complete freedom to invest in any kind of technological or scientific or anything, economic development, anything they want to do, which is the notion of building these smart cities, these centrally controlled, privately owned, and privately managed smart cities, which is exactly what Trump is proposing with so-called freedom cities. And they are absolutely 15-minute cities. It's the same. It's the same idea. It's exactly the same idea. So on the one hand, these people are saying we are opposed to organizations like the WEF, who are very, very heavily pushed the 15-minute city idea. But at the same time, not only are they accelerating the deployment of these of these concepts, and they are building. They own the companies that are instrumental in creating the actual infrastructure that will enable that to happen. So the notion that they're opposed to things like the Great Reset is just such a monumental deception. It's total nonsense. If Borge Brende or whatever, or what's his name from Roche, the new head honcho at the WEF, if they must be sitting there looking at what is happening with the development of things like special economic zones and the involvement of people like Thiel and Musk and people like that, they must be just delighted with the progress that they're making, because they're taking the thing that they say they oppose, and they are accelerating its deployment and its development, and they've got the technological capability and the money to do it.
And they're doing it. Sorry, go ahead.
No, you carry on.
They're doing it. I just love the point you made. They're doing it as if they're framed like as the resistance to it, which is just so ridiculous. Like they're doing the same thing and framing it as the resistance to the thing that they're doing. When you really break it down, how insane is that? But you mentioned Andreessen, however you pronounce his name, Mark Andreessen, and from the Hrvoje, the Andreessen, I always mispronounce his name. He is a chief. He's one of the key people involved in the funding through Pronomos. And so even if it's not just Thiel, they're all involved with that. And the other examples are Gaza. That is another example of exactly the same thing. If you read through it, technocratic structure, digital IDs, tokenized everything, even El Salvador, which is very much connected to this exact same agenda, is just a different variation of a lot of the same things. And so the whole thing is just exploding. I can't stop seeing it connected to everything. And also Zionism being completely immersed in the entire agenda. It's techno-feudalism is really what it's meant to be.
And don't forget as well that also Saudi Arabia, Qatar, the UAE, they're all looking towards Israel for being basically a financial hub in the Middle East, a kind of bridge between kind of, what could you call it? I suppose the kind of brick kind of Belt and Road kind of project and the West in terms of being a financial hub with a Gazan freedom city right there in the middle of it. So one of the things that I know that we all kind of try and stress to people is that this information that kind of alerts you to these kind of things that are happening is not hidden. It is not secret. It is in the public domain. And I know that we all kind of try and put out resources so that people can see that what we're talking about is fairly openly discussed in many quarters. You can go and listen to what they say at the Global Government Summit. Listen to what they're saying, and then look at the developments that are happening around the world. It's not actually that difficult to see it once you kind of are looking at the right kind of in the right direction.
I was just going to add on Ryan's point about El Salvador. In that Alex Jones clip, as Patrick Byrne was saying, let's remake Venezuela into a technocracy, Alex Jones chimes in, we can use Bukele and El Salvador as the model. And I've been saying for years, like I've outed that guy where he gave an interview 3 years ago, Bukele, saying, hey, let's copy the EU and remake a Central American union. I'm like, wait, what? And then you add into that the Isaac Accords, and what's that going to look like for South and Central America? You mean the one with Milei recently that was signed, the Isaac Accords, for Israel to come into Latin America? Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I just recorded like a 5-person podcast I haven't published yet from folks out of Israel talking about the Noahide laws and basically how Greater Israel is more like Greater Planet Israel, and it's quite freaky. And they were talking about this, and as you said, the Isaac Accords and moving into Latin America. So yeah,
I'm just going to jump. Go ahead.
I was going to say we should move on to next. We've been on this question a while.
Yeah, let's do it.
And we got some weird ones. We got some weird ones to get through. Okay, Valkyrie asked, and it's an oddly phrased question, but why do you all believe in nuclear bombs?
Interesting.
I'm open to this conversation.
I don't necessarily.
So look, I'll say why I would tend to believe it because of, and it's not anything like strong, but obviously there are still people living who lived through those things allegedly, right? And I know I've looked into a little bit that whole field of research. For those who don't know what this question is about, there are people who believe that nuclear bombs don't exist, that the U.S. didn't drop nukes at the end of World War II, that there was some weapons used, but it wasn't nukes, and that all the pictures we see of people running naked with skin falling off was due to other kind of reasons, right? That's the general gist of it. I haven't done a deep dive down it, but I would just say, yeah, it's just, I guess, one of those stones that you have to turn over to really look into. But I think everybody here probably is open to it, right?
Yeah,
Maybe,
well, I mean, I think what's interesting about this, and Steve and I've talked about this, because there just like any number of the things we were talking before that we might get into, there's data points to all of these that are, compelling. But for me, what's interesting, a few things, when you look at the nuclear technology, really, because it does come down to not just nuclear bombs, it's nuclear technology or weapons technology, because it's about the actual like plutonium and whether that's actually dangerous and whether that can be weaponized. And like, there's that famous guy who puts it in his mouth and whatever that old video is and says, I'm not harmed by it, and so there's pretty compelling things that make it seem like there's experts, for example, like that guy and others who are claiming that. And as you pointed out, they're like Chernobyl, for example, is clearly there's places where nature's coming back way before they claimed it would. They could just be wrong, I guess. But what's interesting is if you claim it's all of nuclear weapons technology, like it seems to make it almost impossible. There's proof, I would argue, evidence that there's nuclear technology that does work and exist. But again, how I've never been there. I can't prove it's based on what other experts say. But if that's the case, then it seems as if if we claim nuclear weapons don't exist, that would undermine that doesn't exist either. But I'm going to be clear. This is not something that I've gone super deep on. I've looked into it, but it's to be, kind of the asterisk. I've never gone super deep on this. Plenty more to get into to go on. But maybe I should. But that's where I feel is that there's something to it. Maybe it's just that we don't understand it fully. It's not as powerful as they claim, but there does seem to be some level of technology. Maybe it's at the weapons part of it, or the bombs weren't ever actually made. That would make sense to me. But I'll leave it up in the air from there.
I understand. Like it's one of those things where like you can't read, like there's an awful lot of people that have a lot of different views. Some people would say there's no such thing as radiation. Right. Some people would say radiation exists, but it can't be weaponized. Some people can say it can be weaponized. They just haven't figured out how to do it yet. There's this spectrum of like disbelief. And as for the phrasing of the question, why do you believe? I mean, I wouldn't say that I necessarily believe they exist. If you ask me to come down one side or the other, I'd say the weight of evidence suggests they exist. And I know people in the hard sciences who say there's no reason they couldn't exist. I find the idea they don't exist hilarious, because if they don't exist, but they theoretically could exist, then the Cold War wasn't really the Cold War. The Cold War was two teams who both had nuclear bombs that didn't work, afraid the other side had nuclear bombs that did work. And so it becomes very funny.
Really quickly though, that's interesting. Even with the moon discussion, like it's possible that there is bluster in all this too. That's not necessarily that it's not possible, but rather that there's a game of meeting an endpoint before the other team, and so that becomes trying to pretend you did it when maybe you're trying. There's more nuance.
No, Ryan, the spaceship would just bump off the firmament and come back down.
I want to ahead of the questions.
I want to point out. We have over here, I think it's over on your Rumble, Steve, JBGT3 seems to be pushing back. And I think they're making some fair points. Like they're saying, go to a nuclear plant. They mentioned US, France, UK, all did experiments on live humans. They talk about test site in the USSR, Kazakhstan. They talk about nuclear explosion. And I know, for example, because this is something that's been close to me and I've done stories on it, a lot of native indigenous communities in the US had nuclear, alleged nuclear testing on their reservations. And there are many people on those reservations who claim that they can still see the impact generations later, people with birth defects and stuff like that. So I do think there's it's not as simple as none of it exists, but maybe it's worth questioning.
Yeah, I just wanted to fire back at that question. Why is everyone all of a sudden throwing the baby out with the bathwater? Like nothing exists anymore. Infectious disease, nukes, flat Earth, on and on and on. And I think you have to approach each one independently. And you mentioned Kazakhstan. Like, look, I lived in Kazakhstan. I lived 120 kilometers from the polygon, Stalin, Russia, Soviet Union's principal nuclear test site. from 1949 to 1990, and I actually went on the 18,000 square kilometer patch. I brought my own 2 Geiger counters before I even came to Kazakhstan, and I lived in Semey. And like you were saying, Derek, there was people in Semey who have higher rates of cancer, deformities, and then I was on ground zero. Like, it was radioactive. We were on a green radioactive patch of land. We saw mock metros that they built out in this massive space, and it's just kind of hard to think like they're faking it. They're building out all of this infrastructure just to fake it. And now, and to Ryan's point, I think there is a nuance. Like, I don't believe in nuclear winter. That's like, I think that's that scare story. So I think nukes do exist. They can deliver mega death, but I don't think the half-life is that long in terms of radiation. And I think is that aspect of globalism where they want to scare us with the nuclear winter aspect, so then they can bring in the world government. But I think nukes can go off. A lot of people will die, but we will be able to rebuild quickly. But it's going to be more of like a Mad Max type thing. So,
but if the nuclear winter doesn't exist, this brings up a further question: then why has nobody used a nuclear bomb again? Like, I mean, you had the Cold War. You had the Cold War basically facing off mutually assured destruction, but with the decline of the Soviet Union, that stopped being a thing, and then you have nuclear proliferation. Right. Now, I'm not saying I don't believe nuclear weapons exist. Like I said, I would say that they do, but I think what it signposts, the lack of nuclear bomb usage, signposts something a bit more interesting than mutually assured destruction. I think it signposts a sort of cooperation. Like there is an agreement that we won't use nukes.
Yeah,
and there's an agreement between India and Pakistan basically saying, okay, we're not going to nuke each other. We hate each other's guts, but like, let's not get silly. And the very fact that they can say they set these rules shows that they can cooperate far more and far deeper than they say they cooperate.
That's such an important point. With so many things we get into really quickly, though. So what's interesting, though, is that the idea is that, I mean, the only reason that these things make sense, like the lunatic, gassing children, because people argue and they dehumanize and say they're a lunatic, crazy madman terrorist, right? These are governments, and I think all governments are pretty sociopathic and crazy, but they still care about their interests. And so your point is they can recognize, well, why would we both want to drive to this when we're going to kill everybody in all our interests? So they can make an agreement to say, we won't go that far. Doesn't mean somebody else might drive it. That's where I tend to think you get the other outside forces that cause these things to go further. But it's interesting to point out that alone could be a reason why that hasn't happened. But I'll add to if you use the kind of munitions they have today, like the biggest thing they possibly have short of a nuclear weapon, I don't think anybody would be able to tell the difference. Like from our perspective, right? You have this massive explosion. We've never seen that before. We would go, that must be, a mushroom cloud. It's the same kind of thing. So I'd argue that we wouldn't even be able to tell. And so, I'm still I'm with you, Kit. I think that the logic seems to suggest that is likely and possible, but there's plenty of evidence to suggest there's doubts, So I think you'll leave it there for ultimately but I think it's nuanced. I think there's probably more behind it that suggests that there was more reasoning behind it than just not doing it or that they're lying, but could be.
What else you got weird, Kit?
Go ahead, yeah. No, I was just saying that I think it was you, Kit, that brought up the notion of war being performative. I think it was you that wrote that. I was reading something, but I mean something that strikes me about the situation with Ukraine. You've got Russian territory being bombed using NATO-supplied weaponry by a NATO-aligned
proxy.
Now, that seems to me like that would be justification, and God forbid that this ever happened, and I'm certainly not suggesting that it would be valid if it did, but given the kind of diplomatic structures that are in place, why would that not be considered to be legitimate cause for war for Russia?
But
now,
it would have been.
It would be. So why has that not come up? So it's almost as if, as we were all alluding to, and as you were talking about there, Ryan, the war, even war is not is nowhere near to being close to what we think it is, what we are told it is. Because if war was just about defending your nation against aggression, then Russia would be at war with NATO now, I suggest.
Yeah, but
yeah, I mean,
go ahead.
If you took that exact scenario back to the 1980 and described it to anybody with any kind of like awareness of geopolitics, that this just happened, what happens next? They would have said nuclear war. Nuclear war happens next, no question. The fact it hasn't these days is very interesting.
I think it speaks to a different place, I mean, it could be just like you said, Kit, maybe they're just, they do have interest in not destroying literally everything. So if that's the way, that's the point, maybe that's not how it actually happens, but if that is, then they may have made an agreement or maybe just from Russia's perspective, they're like, why would we push this knowing that, we got a Samson option over here, there's other considerations, but I think that it really does, I think there's more theater, like you're saying, and I think we're at a different realm of, rather time of war. It's fifth generation warfare. I've said this for a long time. I don't believe kinetic warfare is even really, it's going to inevitably happen to some degree, but I don't think that's where this goes anymore. I think it's well beyond that, especially when you get into the technocratic conversation. So maybe that's, the point. But I mean, I think this is a valid discussion to have to wonder whether or not these things exist and look at the way they're acting. I enjoy these kind of conversations.
Okay. Next question. And Steve already hinted at it with the glass dome. Have any of you seen any proof of space beyond low Earth orbit? That's from Captain Birdheart.
Proof.
Look, all I'm gonna say on that one was one of my past podcast guests just flew into town. David Skripak, he's a Canadian Air Force veteran, and he's like, I asked him, David, is the Earth flat? You're a pilot. He's like, look, when I'm in Sakhalinsk, I can see Alaska, which is on the other side of them. How is that possible? So anyways.
I mean, it's interesting. You could always jump in and say, well, maybe he's lying. So there's always a doubt, right? But it's just interesting that clearly there are, like I said before, the very flat Earth conversation. There's so many. It's the same thing. There's so many variations and elements and the biblical side of it, and it's just all over the place. But there's valid points to be made about this that are compelling. And we could get into it if we really want to. Like, there are very real points that go, well, that's crazy. GPS stuff, radar stuff, Antarctica, where you just go, well, okay, there's very clearly something going on here. Maybe the government's hiding something. Maybe the Earth is flat. Really, it does say something. I don't believe it shows that the Earth is flat. I did a show a long time ago. I think it was called Flat Earth Theory and Exercise and Keeping an Open Mind. And the whole point was really, and I just did this as my own thought experiment, going into it with a completely open mind, not like if you step into a conversation like this going, I know it's flat, but I'm going to look at the evidence, you're going to guide yourself toward that direction, And so it's like trying to be objective. Like, what does this show me? And I went through it really extensively for quite a while and came to the conclusion, like what I just said. I don't believe this shows the Earth is flat. I think there's evidence that that disputes that, but there is something that needs to be addressed. But the problem is that people look at it and they find the anomaly and go, I knew it is flat. And they jump to, same with like the moon conversation, which we might get to. There's valid things that are very you could prove are lying today, but that doesn't necessarily mean what they think it means. It could mean something else. That's where I think it is.
Yeah, I'll throw in something and I got to get running. I think that this, like a lot of like the nukes and other things, there's typically a lack of nuance in a lot of these discussions. But I'll first say this to the flat earthers out there. You guys need to up your game on production. I've not seen one good flat earth documentary. If you're trying to make your case, you need to get you jump all over the place. You show clips of this. There's no really well told narrative that exposes it. It's all just, I don't know, even Hibbler Productions, whatever, no offense to anybody. None of them have been impressive. I have a lot of friends who are flat earthers and I've sat like, hey, give me your best shot. All right, tell me what you got. I'm open to it. But I think, again, nuance, like you can, as I do, question the moon landing, question a lot of stuff about space, question what's going on in Antarctica, and question, all these other kind of pieces, and without necessarily embracing flat Earth. And I actually tend to be more interested in the hollow Earth stuff, which goes back hundreds of years as well, and a whole other kind of interesting rabbit hole. But yeah, I think that you can question what's going on in Antarctica and the Antarctic Treaty and Admiral Byrd and the things he says he saw. And there's definitely a lot of there. And I don't know, did we ever go to the moon? It is space even real? I keep my mind open to all these things. I look at the stars and I'm like, oh, it's a beautiful night. And I'm like, damn it, is it even real? I don't know. I'm open to it, but I don't think you have to embrace flat Earth to ask those questions.
I used to not believe in space at all and was a hardcore flat earther until I saw Katy Perry floating up there and Jeff Bezos's dick rocket singing Louis Armstrong, and I was like, I'm sold. I'm on board. It's exactly like they tell us it is. Yeah.
What's kind of funny about it is that if the official line would suddenly flip and say, you know what, we lied the whole time, and Earth is flat, and if you send a rocket up high enough, it will hit a glass dome, and we would still be in a position of never being able to prove them wrong.
Dave Weiss would be doing round Earth videos next week.
That is such an important point, though. Like, that's the problem with these kind of conversations. I say this about space in general. It's like, how the world, it's like probably the Wild West up there. There's probably entire civil, like battles taking place. We have no way to truly, kind of half being facetious, but how could we possibly know? So that's a good point. That kind of leaves you with the conversation where even what we decide, there's no way you could really know for sure. That's why I kind of made a joke about proof. It's like people conflate proof and evidence. Clearly there's evidence, but proof, I don't think we have it for any of these conversations.
Yeah, I've always maintained I don't need the shape of the Earth to know the shape of the Earth, to know that my government's lying to me.
Yeah. Go ahead, Iain.
Yeah, I would echo what Steve said, and also going back to something Kit said earlier. It's all got to be. The best we can do is try and come to a conclusion based on the balance of evidence that we're aware of. So the balance of evidence that I'm aware of suggests to me that the world is not flat. But I'm open to the idea that it might be. There are some interesting things that has come out of the research of flat earthers, things around the potential existence of an ether, and there's an interesting experiment that I suggest people go and look at called the Sagnac experiment and the Sagnac effect. That's all quite interesting. And sure, be open to these things, but as far as I'm concerned, no, the world is a globe and space exists.
I suppose I would argue from the same position. I would argue like germ theory, essentially.
Right.
Like the majority of people treat the Earth as if it's round, and the vast majority of people get where they're going. Like our technology is based on this, and we're not all accidentally winding up in the wrong place. GPS, like people have been navigating based on around Earth for hundreds, if not thousands of years, and they get there. It just seems to make the idea that we could develop a system based on around Earth that accidentally works on a flat Earth doesn't make any sense to me.
I have to add really quickly, though, if you really, and maybe this is just my ignorance on this topic, but if you think about it, is it not based on a flat map scenario anyway? Like the GPS scenario, you're basically using
No, because they had issues, like, for example, they had issues for a long, long time with correctly calculating longitude.
Right, but these are kind of different conversations, though, right? Like, because if we're talking about like you getting somewhere, that's what I was really referencing. Like that we get lost when we're driving somewhere. That's ultimately based on a flat map design, if I'm understanding.
Well, I was talking more grandly about traveling like cross oceans and stuff.
Okay. People were using the stars, whether the stars are real or fake. They were using the stars.
Well, that's a good point too. Yeah, definitely. Well, I mean, these conversations definitely overlap. So I don't know if that was the next.
They were also
good.
Sorry, and yes, and they were also using the movement of the stars, which to help with navigation, and all the movement of the stars certainly supports the notion of us being on a rotating ball.
Well, here's an interesting addition to that, right? So you can make the same case. Okay, I argue you can pretty clearly prove that people have done that and are successful in doing so. Would you argue that one point then proves the Earth is round? Maybe not, right? Maybe there's another, or even the GPS. Maybe there's an adaptation that makes it. The point is that these things shouldn't be taken as absolutes on either side of the conversation. But the space part of it I was going to go to is, I mean, it's the same conversation at the end of the day, and the moon in all of it. It's really just the same point because it's a comical, like the special phone call from the fucking cord in the office, straight to the moon, real time. Like, really? That didn't happen, guys. That's not, they can't even do that today in real time. Or the idea of the maps that we know that they lied about, the edits you can prove, the overlapping identically to, what was it, in New Mexico and the terrain there. Like, they lied, guys. That's a fact. You can clearly prove they lied to us about stuff, but I don't think it proves that it's because, that means that flat or the moon didn't exist or they couldn't do it. There's all these different possibilities. It could, or it could mean that they lied about the space race to convince Russia that they did it first, or because they found something there they didn't want us to see, or, and there's so many variations to it, but I think it's the same point. So if you wanted to get into the space side of it, Kit, I think that's the same conversation.
Well,
I just want to add one more thing to that real quick. Just that one of the things I always say to the flat earthers, and maybe it applies to some of these like more outlandish theories, is like, what does it change, right? I mean, I get that the flat earthers are like, if this is the truth and space is fake and all this is fake, then this is the biggest lie ever. And this changes everything. It changes history. The Jesuits, switched us from flat earth maps to round, there's the whole thing, right? I guess I could see that. But for me, ultimately, if the earth is round or flat, they're still working on technocracy. They're still building the digital dystopia one way or the other, whether it's turtles all the way down, whether it's a hollow earth, round earth, flat earth, whatever, everything is still like, I can't get out of it. I can't get out of the dome. If it's a simulation, I can't get out of the simulation. So I might as well try to improve it as much as possible and work to stop all the tyranny. That's just kind of where I come back to this stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose to a certain extent, like,
you go, Kit.
I suppose you would argue, like, you're all stuck in prison working on a prison break, and there's one guy says, yeah, but the prison isn't real, guys. But at that point, it becomes an unhelpful thing to talk about. Like, maybe you are, maybe you aren't, but I believe I'm in a prison and I need to get out of it. So
Someone commented
let's talk
that
about that
said,
when we get out of the prison.
They said we would be in a FEMA camp and the flat earthers would still be debating if the earth is flat or not.
I don't know why that was so funny to me. That's just hilarious. It's really, what's the result of debating that? But, we arguably, I guess you could argue if you really had the means, you could get out of this planet or prove that. In a prison, less likely, but that's just a hilarious point, because we go through these kind of fruitless, exercises in a lot of ways. Not every conversation we're bringing up, but I think part of it is that's the point, to pull us into some of these things where the endpoint is never, at least at the moment, not clear. So we end up grasping at what we want, and the partisan fills the rest of the blanks in, and that's kind of how it goes today.
There's also going to be an argument over whose FEMA camp is the most libertarian.
God, crazy.
Yeah, and I would say as well. Also, to the flat earthers, if let's say that if we can be open to the idea of the possibility, perhaps, that not everything we've been told about geometry and everything is what we think it is, true. But equally, therefore, it might be worth being open to the possibility that the thing that you're talking about is a psyop, because if it is a psyop, in terms of distraction, diverting you away from things like actual dystopian control mechanisms that are being enforced upon us, it's perfect. You can spend your entire life debating something that you cannot possibly resolve unless you get into a spaceship and fly out of Earth's orbit.
Right.
You can spend your whole life engaged in that. And you might think it's very, very important, but that won't stop the rollout of a dystopian technocratic control system.
Ian's right. Let's crowdfund for an Antarctic expedition, you guys. Independent Media Alliance. We're going to.
They did it. The flat earthers did it recently. I know we're almost ready to move on. I have friends who are involved in that, and one of them who is still a hardcore flat earther. And I asked him, I said, so what did you think? You had two round earthers and two flat earthers, and they went to Antarctica. And I said, so what was the thing? And he's like, well, they disproved some of our claims, but we still think there's more questions. Like, they still didn't let it go.
Right.
Even I don't think there's any way to dissuade people if they believe, obviously the mainstream would say the same thing about us. These conspiracy theorists won't let go of their theories, whatever. But yeah, even going to Antarctica didn't solve anything.
Really quickly, to address what the conversation in the chat that Derrick was commenting on, or commented within. First of all, to clarify for the people that act like this is a Q&A, guys. People ask questions and we respond to the questions. So it's like, that's why this conversation is being had. But what's important is the way the conversation is not just about the topic, right? It's not that we're trying to influence, promote, or not promote one of these topics. It's about the critical thinking, in regard to this. And what we just came to right there is that, look, if you're in the chat and you're like, I am absolutely 100% convinced I can prove that. Okay, maybe you're right. Maybe I'm missing something. But if I'm over here going, I disagree, and you lay it all out, I look at it and go, well, I disagree. Then we just go, okay, amicable disagreement is super important to be like, well, it can't be you're a shill or you're so too stupid to see it. It has to be, okay, maybe I'm missing something. I disagree, and you leave it there. That's what a lot of this is about, is the critical process. And I agree with most everyone in the panel. I don't think we have enough information to ever at the moment ever really know. And so ultimately it behooves us to discuss it, break it down, and then leave it where it is, and not become some kind of, no planes, 9/11. Like, this happens every single time, and it's weaponized in order to keep us from seeing what's already there every time,
We're just trying to have a fun Christmas Q&A, guys. Calm down.
Right? Gosh.
I really love the comment here. It says, I don't really care about flat Earth. I can't prove it myself, and I'll probably be dead by 2030 anyway. Who cares? I'm learning how to grow vegetables in 5-gallon buckets. And that's true, because the algorithm ghetto has literally come to my house. So it's like, guys, yeah.
Yeah, that's wild. You disappeared there for a minute, too. We thought the HOA got you.
That Mexican internet. What can I tell you?
Hrvoje has got to give up the biometrics. No more internet for you. That's a definite possible outcome over the next few years, and they're hammered down full speed ahead towards the 2030 nonsense. Just what the Trump administration has done in the last 10, 11 months in terms of setting up the techno state is immense. And it's all stuff that even during COVID, when they were trying to lay out the framework, it was like hard to see how you could get people to come around to it, and they didn't even bother with that. They were like, nope, we're doing it. If you want to work, you got to do it. If you want to get on the internet, you don't have a choice. No, there's no public comment. No, what vote? No, not on this. And people are still walking around pretending that they have a say in their government, or that their government has ears to hear their voices.
I got to go, guys. Thank you so much for this, Kit, for organizing this. Been a good one. And thanks to everybody who's commenting and all the questions. See you guys at the next IMA panel.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thanks, brother.
Take care, Derrick.
What do you think, Kit? Do you want to get us more questions, or you time to wrap?
One more weirdest question you got.
Yeah, I'm afraid it doesn't get much weirder than the flat Earth question. I'm afraid, and we touched on the moon landing stuff.
Oh, I could pull up some. I'm just kidding. Go ahead.
You gotta spend more time with our chat, man.
How much longer does everybody want to go? Because I've got 3 questions I think we should get to. Most of them can be quite quick.
Fire away.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. This is one not for me because I don't have any kids, but dear IMA panel, how do you tackle the deceptive Santa brings the presents and other little lies and fantasy lore about elves and other spirits around the Christmas holidays with your children, nieces, or nephews?
I turn it into a military display, and I have elves just coming down from the rooftops on, like the U.S. government just did. Now, I don't have any children, so I don't necessarily, I dated a girl who had a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old for a little over a year. So I had like somewhat of experience with that. I didn't really engage with I pretty much just went along with that point because I wasn't the original parent with like the pretending of it. But I'd like to think that if so the question is, I guess, do you pretend they're Santa Claus? Did I take that correctly?
Yeah, basically.
Okay, so I think I would, if I had children, I would do the Santa Claus thing. The role play, because I just feel like there's a good experience with that for children. I don't think there's a benefit to being like, it's not real when they're like far too young to understand what that means. And then at some point when they're getting older, like maybe before the usual, just like not let it become some like awareness all of a sudden that it's not, and like explain, like, what my mom did with me, it became sort of like an overlap to it's Santa's the spirit of Christmas. And so it's always kind of around us kind of a thing when I was just understanding, and that kind of carried it further than just like as an entity. If that makes any difference to people, but I do think there's some value to it as a younger person. Go ahead.
I'd agree with Ryan. I have kids, and for example, the Tooth Fairy thing. Before I even had a chance my wife was already doing the under the pillow thing, and I was like, no, I wanted to tell her there was no tooth fairy, and it was too late. But I kind of agree with you that I think eventually they're going to realize it's not true. And anyways, I tell them all this stuff about like the government, and but they're growing up in this magical sort of vibe moment.
Yeah,
and I think that's really cool. And like all of us, they're going to realize, okay, yeah, it wasn't real, but we're having fun. So
yeah, think about what you're taking from them. You know, welcome to the fucking technocracy. Like when you're 4 years old, you know, it's like welcome to the shit. It's pretty crazy times. You know, it's like let them enjoy their childhood for a little bit.
Now, kids, Santa represents the surveillance state.
That just sounds terrible.
And the red and black are the
realize
colors
that
of Luciferians.
Yeah,
He sees you when you're asleep.
I just told the kids that. You know, I just told the kids that Santa Claus was a merchandise marketing product from Coca-Cola. That's what I said. Now I remember saying we convinced the kids that that we had a surveillance camera because we wanted because the whole question of whether or not Santa Claus was real. So we pretended to set up a surveillance camera that we were gonna record Santa Claus, and then I got dressed up and videoed myself coming in and putting and they didn't fool them for a second. They just said, "Well, that's you."
Like, Dad, why are you in the Santa outfit?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, yeah, all right. Well, I tried.
Cookies, you asshole. Now he's not coming.
Can we see that video?
Yeah, seriously.
Right? Do you still have that?
Yeah, that'd be great.
I would like to add that to my intro.
I don't know, maybe somewhere.
To the point, though,
I'm estranged from my former partner, so getting hold of it might be a bit tricky. But
Nice excuse.
Yeah. But to the point, though, that Iain brought up, you know, and maybe kind of the point of the question, there are, like, from a religious perspective, you know, there's a deeper meaning behind what we're discussing. But even then further to understand that even the very day is not even actually lined up with like the actual biblical day. You know, there's a lot of like changing if you understand this. But the point would be more of the celebration, right? And so Christmas today is a consumerist thing that's been turned into, you know, not at all what it was originally about. But your point is actually easy to look up. Coca-Cola is the one that made the fat, jolly. It was the original Saint Christopher was a thin figure with, you know, still had the red
Nicholas.
some degree hat, and you know what I say, Christopher. Sorry, Nicholas. Yeah.
Nicholas.
And so it's important to think about how that was used and what that drives. But it's a very different thing to like take that away from a child. And, you know, you could raise them in a way that was in the right direction and not lean them into the consumerist side of it. But that's very difficult today with what schools they go to if you're into some, you know, larger school. But I think it's worth knowing that and at least trying to overlap that with what that is for children.
There is definitely a rise in the sort of like brutal honesty parenting. People say, I'm not going to ever lie to my kids. And I don't have kids, so I feel bad saying it. But like, I know that I wouldn't agree with that. I mean,
yeah, I agree.
I would feel, and I know that this is what my parents used to say, that your job as a parent is to basically slowly introduce your children to stuff and you can judge on a one-to-one basis, child by child, what they're ready to hear and what they're not ready to hear. And you don't ever have to tell them, you know what, Santa doesn't exist, like, because they'll sort of slowly fade that out on their own.
And I think that's a really good point. That's a really good point, because there's nothing wrong with kids having a wonder about something and wondering about whether something or not is true. Right. And you don't have to be explicitly, in my view, you don't have to explicitly resolve that for them. In fact, why should you? Let them figure it out themselves. That is an important part of
right.
I just got a good idea, Steve, really quickly. What if you start like you have your first conspiracy, opening the door for your children to be like, leave some clues. Maybe Santa Claus is not what you think, and like open that door to get them critical thinking moving. If you could do it in a way that wouldn't destroy that kind of, you know, childlike part of it, just fun thought. But
yeah, sometimes it'll piss a kid off. Sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes they're like, I outsmarted mom and dad, you know. And
it pisses the ones off that get dragged, you know, when you're like when it goes on way too long and they try to pretend, like when there's a point when you can clearly see that there's a little bit of, discernment going on, then you got to kind of open that door. But that you get pissed off when you have been fooled and you're like, I don't know, what's the oldest kid or oldest age you think makes sense for a kid to still believe it? It's like that's pushing the boundary.
I suppose you also have to say, like, what are we talking about here when we say Santa doesn't exist? Because obviously, North Pole Santa flying around. There is a more sort of like Tolpa thought form spirit of the season aspect to Santa that does kind of exist.
That's my mom sort of did.
As a feeling, it does exist.
Hang on, are you saying Santa doesn't exist?
Well, we found our age, guys.
I have some documents here in front of me from some very high-placed sources within the federal government, and they're telling me that their elf network has responded to them that there's a massive threat to the reindeer. It is being monitored. We've called in the Air Force and a tactical drone squad to protect.
Also, NORAD tracks Santa. NORAD tracks Santa's sleigh, so there's proof there.
On a round Earth, Ian.
Yes.
Oh, what was
no, it's not.
It was NASA. I know we're going backwards a little bit. Just occurred to me. There was some government memo that referred to NASA as some nickname. What was it? Never a straight answer, right? That's what they used to call NASA in internal memos.
Never a straight answer. Yeah.
Right. Okay, 2 more questions to power through, and then I think we can call it a night.
Sounds good.
They're seasonal. They're pleasant. They're not at all weird. I'm sorry about that. Okay, Jerry Alatalo asked like 15 questions, and I'm sorry, Jerry, but like I can only answer one of them. I would have been here all day, and I chose this one because it's your best. What personal knowledge gives you good reason to remain optimistic that this generation will take right action in response to such truly wicked agenda challenges? And how do you maintain hope for the future?
Good question. Well, I'll jump in. I mean, I think something I've been talking about a lot that I think Steve and I on the AIM Wake Up talk about, and I think has been visibly shown to be the case over many different agendas for a while, which is, my personal experience is that when you're doing what we do and you're tapping into this, that there's been consistent notes. And I think we're watching it right now with the conservative awareness around what's going on, or the two-party illusion, or the Democrat or all of us awareness during COVID-19, that people are rapidly beginning to see long-held lies, or rather, question and see through long-held deceptions. And I mean, that's being shown to us right now. Now, why, we can get into lots of different, hypotheticals, but it makes me feel inspired every day that there are so many people that are starting to break these things down. And I argue that's why this is such a desperate rush to make this future happen, and why there's so much crackdown on, everything's being thrown at us at once. I'm very hopeful right now that there's enough momentum to truly make something positive happen if we can actually marshal that in a real way, which is the real question. But that to me is what it comes down to, is that like with COVID-19, you could see it, guys, and you look back. I made this point many times during it, but the real one is at the end of it, there's people that took like 7 shots, how insane that is. And remember, they ended, and they still sort of are, by saying you need that 8th shot or whatever number it was, right? They were like, you need that one. That one's coming out. And there was like 7% uptake. And even right now, it's less than 50% uptake in the industry. So what it shows you is that even though it took super long, even they are like, yeah, okay, something's going on, and it really did begin to show us that there was the majority was completely aware of it. I think we're seeing that right now in a lot of different conversations. Israel being I never would have predicted that people, rather specifically Zionism, that people would have actually been talking about this, genocide or not. We've seen previous smaller genocides in Gaza before, and so anyway, people are starting to actually see these things, and it really does make me feel that there's at least possible for real change. And so that's what it is for me. And I think we just need to look at it to see it.
Yeah, I would say that the fact, and kind of really echoing something that you just said there, Ryan, is the fact that everything they are doing is designed around trying to control our behavior means that what they fear most is our behavior. So we control our behavior. We have agency. We just have to realize it. And in specific examples of younger people, there was just a simple thing. I saw a video the other day of a guy that was stopped in the street, and of course, this is just one young man that they've stopped in the street. But he was bang on it. He was only in his, he must have been early 20s, I would have thought, and he was right bang on it. He was not falling for any of it. He was questioning digital ID. He was saying that it's just a control system, that him and his mates weren't going to opt into it. So, I mean, I think, as echoing again what Ryan said, there is growing awareness, and the fact that that everything is geared up to control us means that the fact that we can exercise our agency is the thing that they fear. Gives us all hope that we can resist what's happening.
And that's what they're trying to take away, right? Our ability to reason and think and discern. And in the moment we step through this, arch into the technocratic world, I think that's what happens.
I'll add, we've never not made it, if you think about it.
Yes.
For thousands of years, we've continuing on. So I think that's hopeful.
Yeah, no, I underscore what Ryan was saying, because we do talk about it pretty much every week. But I noted for years that the largest voting bloc in America is people who don't vote, followed by independents, and then people who are still desperately clinging on to the two-party illusion. And they're the best funded, and in a lot of cases they're the loudest, but they're not the most. And people need to remember that. They need to give themselves permission to talk about it. They need to, if you need permission to talk about it, I'll give it to you. Go ahead, talk about it. It's cool. More of us should. But it's that intentional compartmentalization and like fragmentization of everyone, where people are walking around thinking they're isolated and they're the only person in their community or their sphere, their job, whatever, who thinks the way that they do, because everyone is conditioned culturally not to talk about that. It's impolite, or it's this, or it's that. And for the most part, people are trapped in this, varying degrees of bubbles of like office approved nonsense small talk that just carries over, which is why authenticity resonates so well, which is why they're going after independent media, legitimate independent media, so bad. And it's also why you hear Chuck Schumer saying Nick Fuentes' name on the freaking Senate floor. They got to let you know who the freaking, ops are and all that kind of stuff. But it's also a reaction to, 10 to 15 years of just relentless, legitimate journalism on the part of an actual independent media.
You guys have all gone pro people in your optimism. I'm going to go anti everything else. I'm going to say that my optimism would come from a repeated demonstration that the people in charge have a reach that exceeds their grasp. They can't do what they think they can do. I mean, we talked about it earlier with the internet. They set up the internet to control people, and within 10 years, it had been subverted to undermine everything they tried to do. It put back their agenda years simply trying to do it. And I think you could say, you could argue COVID did the same thing. And this is a comparison I've probably made loads of times, but if you look at psychopathic individuals, serial killers, kind of people that take out a $20 million life insurance on their wife and then kill them the next day, psychopaths are limited by their own limitations. They have a neglect of empathy and a neglect of imagination that means they can't succeed. There are inbuilt limitations to the psychopathic system that won't let it succeed. And that is what I would take optimism from.
I like that. Well, enjoyed the conversation today, guys.
Yeah. One last question.
Oh, sorry.
Two last questions. This is a nicer question. This one is just for me, and it's from KBBB, and it says, "What news of your missing cat?" And unfortunately, there is no news of my missing cat.
Oh, sorry to hear that.
Maybe Christmas miracle, he'll be on my couch with a tartan ribbon around his neck come Christmas morning. But actual final question. Something lighter in the spirit of the season. What is your favorite Christmas tradition, media, song, TV show, or movie at this time of year?
Christmas Vacation. Grew up with that. We used to watch it every single time. You know, it's a classic for my family. So it's pretty much that and like Christmas Story. And you know, honestly, because of my mom loves Elf, so we watch that every time too. But pretty much those first two are the ones that stick with me for movies anyway.
But like Trading Places, if it's adults, that's a
Die
Christmas.
Hard. You gotta love.
Well, I mean, Die Hard is a Christmas movie. It is. I think we're watching like King of Kings this year, but Christmas Story is phenomenal.
Right.
I remember when I was a kid, there was like a Muppets Christmas movie that we watched for a bunch of years in a row. All works.
Right.
As long as it doesn't have Tim Allen in it, you're all right.
Yeah, I like Santa Claus. That's a good one. It's a pretty well done movie, actually. It is pretty good. Go ahead, Warren.
Ryan said Christmas Vacation. I thought you meant like Christmas Vacation, and for me, that's actually part of the tradition is going on a vacation for Christmas, which I am this year, and just Home Alone was classic, and it was filmed not far from where I grew up, I believe, in Illinois, and I was gonna say just being around
neighborhood.
Yeah, I think just being around friends and family, just kind of like unplugging, forgetting about the technocracy, and just good food and drink, whatever that means for anyone, and so
I echo the.
I like anything that it.
Go ahead.
Yeah, definitely it's the family thing, and definitely I like anything that is not a musical. As long as it's not a musical, I'll be all right. I can sit through it. And the best thing about Christmas is cheese. All the different types of cheeses. That's my
That's a T-shirt right there. How are you not selling that T-shirt?
And they say that white people don't have culture.
Hey, Ian, have you seen the musical with Will Ferrell and Ryan Reynolds? It's the newer one. It's actually you might like it. It's not bad. It's actually pretty fun.
No, I won't like it.
You'd be surprised. No, trust me, I don't like musicals much either, but this one it's just fun. It's well done. It's pretty funny. It's
I don't think I haven't explained myself fully. Musicals make my flesh creep. I can't.
It's another T-shirt.
I can't stand them either. Honestly, I cannot stand them.
Well, to be fair, this is like somebody making one to make fun of. You know, in essence, it's Will Ferrell and them sort of making a mockery of this idea. But I get what you're saying. What was the other?
Well, I really like Will Ferrell.
Yeah, he's funny.
The closest I'll get to something like that is like.
So I'll give it a go.
You really like Will Ferrell? Jesus, Ian. I feel like I don't even know you anymore.
Anchorman is just one of the best films ever made, I think.
Anchorman's great.
I love it.
I do like Will Ferrell. I find him funny, and my wife hates him. And I don't understand why.
I thought the most controversial thing we were going to talk about today was the fake moon landings, and it turns out you guys all like Will Ferrell.
It's like I said before, comedy is subjective, but clearly it's a you know what for me it's growing up like Adam Sandler kind of a thing. Like what's weird is when you get to a point today which has happened to probably all of us, where what you're doing politics and worldview, all of a sudden you're going, man, that guy sucks. Like in his life he sucks, but he's really funny and the music's good. You know that happens a lot today. But and I'm not even saying that about them in particular, but for those that may dislike them for one reason or another, it's more about just like growing up with it. And there's so many of those examples for me. The humor, but I really do find it funny. Like there's something about his sort of shtick that really just makes me laugh, and I think what do you not like about him, out of curiosity, Kit?
Will Ferrell?
I feel about Will Ferrell the same way Ian feels about musicals.
That's funny.
For some reason, he just gets on my nerves. I can't help it.
It's probably something that just rubs you the wrong way.
Everybody has person like that. And
yeah,
sure. Like I heard somebody say that about Hugh Jackman the other day. It's like somebody's, I'm not a huge Hugh Jackman fan, but the idea of having that strong a reaction to it, it's like somebody saying, I really don't like beige.
Yeah,
beige is disgusting.
There's nothing polarizing enough about Hugh Jackman to have that reaction to him. There really isn't, man. I don't know. I think John C. Reilly is superior to Will Ferrell, but that's personal.
I might agree.
John C. Reilly is a fantastic actor in general.
Yeah. Well, so is Will Ferrell, though, to be quite honest. If you've seen, he's got some very serious roles that I think are really well done. But I would agree.
He was in that thing about the remote.
Brought up Adam Sandler. I was thinking about how much we all wore the heck out of and just loved that they're all gonna laugh at you comedy special of his when it came out, and just how 90% of the jokes on that now, if you ran it back, you'd be like,
right,
okay. You know, and we were just howling over it back in the day because it was just, we'd never heard it. We didn't, yeah.
It's for the time, you know, it really was. It was a different, like, I mean, I've said that about, I make the joke about Teen Wolf. I love that movie when I was a kid. I remember watching that, like, however many years later, going like, what the fuck is this? Like, this is the dumbest thing I've ever seen in my life. Surfing on a car, you know, whatever it is, it's really ridiculous. It's a guy who turns into a wolf and everyone's like, yeah, that's normal. But whatever it was at the time, it was just like, that was a hit movie. It was big. It was a big movie. You know, it's who knows why, you know, Dr. Steve Brule, they mentioned in the chat.
I would just like to say that the worst website in the world is Rotten Tomatoes.
Yeah.
Because the people that review the people that review movies on Rotten Tomatoes, you know, they're looking for character depth in an Arnold Schwarzenegger action film. Yeah, that's not, you know, that's if that is what you're expecting, that's not going to work for you. It's just
do you know how the rating system on Rotten Tomatoes? Do you know how the rating system on Rotten Tomatoes works? It's the most crooked thing on the internet, and that is saying something. Like, to get an 87% fresh rating on Rotten Tomatoes, what that means is that 87% of the people who reviewed it gave it a positive review. So if 87% of people give it 51% out of 100, it gets an 87% rating. That is it. It is the most, and it was deliberately set up that way a few years ago when I think it was Captain Marvel and Ghostbusters, the female remake of Ghostbusters came out. They totally changed up the Rotten Tomatoes system so companies could boost their movies. It's
add a few bots to the mix, and guess what? We tipped it over to 47%.
Exactly. I don't actually answer the question. So Christmas, it's what's weird about Christmas things also is that, like, something that isn't at all Christmas related can become a Christmas thing in your family just because you happen to watch it at Christmas. Like, there's this series in the UK called The Last Kingdom, which is about Alfred the Great. And because we just happen to watch it at Christmas, it is now a thing we watch at Christmas. But I would say in my family, there are two things that summarize British Christmases the most that we watch every year. And that is the animated movie Arthur Christmas, which is great. It's a really wonderful movie. And it is the Christmas special of a sitcom called Peep Show, which is angry and bitter and awful, but very Christmassy.
Yeah, I mean, well, it's funny how the movie it's a cultural point right now that all of us were like, the movies we like for Christmas is, you know, they laid out 4 different points right there about different things, but it sits with you, you know, there's these memories with them, but the family part of it for me is always like the, you know, really not even going out and doing things like we used to love to go out and get a Christmas tree. That was one of our, you know, go and actually cut one down. But later we ended up going like, we don't like cutting down a tree anymore. So we ended up going with like the, you know, the fake ones, but I missed that. I missed the idea of going out there and getting dressed up in the snow and getting hot cocoa and a caramel apple and cutting it down and bringing it back. Like we did that every single year for a really long time. So it's things like that just, you know, that's, I mean, almost to the point to where in our lifetime, we may get to a point to where those kind of things are memories of things that don't exist anymore. Not to put a negative point on it, but it's like, that's what makes it so great. Like these old ideas, you know, that you tend to look back on more favorably, you know, looks nicer in the past, but really just those kind of routines and memories, you know, I was going to say at home, just the collection of the family, you know, not the presents necessarily, but just being there at, you know, Christmas night, fire kind of thing. I really value that.
I no longer care for the Christmas tree, and I'm like, I wouldn't do it, but then my kid is like, no, I want one. I'm like, And then here in Mexico, the Christmas trees are like a third the size. They're like mini trees, so whatever.
Yeah, we definitely got a smaller tree this year. I think she wanted an even smaller one than the one we ended up getting, but it's the first year that I haven't gone out and like got a fucking giant live tree in a while.
Yeah,
I like one of the good things about kids growing up and not being around anymore is that you can have a Christmas tree that fits on top of the TV.
There you go. You can watch your movies at the same time.
Right? Yeah. Right? Watch some Die Hard, trim the tree.
All right.
Yeah.
I like what Rami said, though. It's about, starting and sticking with your own traditions. Create things for your family, like Kit was saying. Do things like that and create your own and start those kind of things. That's nice.
Does anybody have any closing thoughts to wrap up?
Man, it's hard after such a nice finishing point. And we're like, back to the terrible world that we're living in.
We don't always have to have closing thoughts.
Let's pretend there is no terrible world.
Right,
okay?
right.
Let's just say, I can't think of anything to say.
Well,
there's no terrible world.
Go ahead, Ian.
It's a terrible world in one sense. In that we suffer the rule of idiots. So it's a terrible world in that sense. But I don't know about you guys, but most of the time, and I think I spend time with the people that I love and friends and family, and we can all have a laugh. We those are the things that make our lives worth living, enjoying ourselves, doing the things that we like, having a nice Christmas with family, all that kind of stuff. So life is not terrible.
Mm-hmm.
The situation that of being under the yoke of these idiot rulers is not a good situation. But life itself is not terrible. Life is great. And we can all enjoy ourselves, and most of us are fortunate enough, we are the people that, all of us, we are fortunate enough to be able to enjoy our lives. And we should make the most of that, because there are a lot of people in this world who are not in that position. So, let's just enjoy it because we should.
That is a very good note to end on.
Really quickly, Kid, just to be clear, at the point, I'm kind of being facetious. People that watch my work and stuff know that I genuinely think we're on a kind of a positive turn despite all the chaos. But to add to the, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to jump on the end point there, but I just want to make sure people didn't think that, that I'm like, the world sucks.
Right.
Because
nobody thinks you're going to be a pessimist, okay?
But people new to the work, though, because it's important, though, that with how crazy things are, that I think most of us, you know what it is? It comes back to this defensive point. Like, we're not black-pilled. This group is not a bunch of people going, we're all doomed and the world's going to end. Like everyone tried to frame this as in the beginning. There's a lot of solutions and a lot of positive things. And I really, echoing Ian's point, there's a lot of good in the world and a lot of amazing people doing good things for good reasons. It's all over the place. And whether the nice guys finish last is where we may be at the moment, I don't think that has to be the reality, So please, somebody else jump in so I don't have to steal Ian's final point.
We did have a question in the chat about how do people volunteer to support the IMA on the back end.
Well, remember, there's no financial mechanism. It's not going to be like that. There's not going to be any donations. There's not going to be. Unless we all decide in the future.
On the tech end and distribution end and stuff like that.
That's mostly waiting. Like right now, share the content. Put it. People. The plan is we're multi-streaming. We all have the opportunity to post them if we want. The plan was to wait until we have the Odyssey portal, which just ended up taking. That was, like a long time ago. Yeah, and so, but we talked to them. They're still working on it. It's just they've had issues. But they're making positive. The point is, this is what it's about right now. And when that comes to pass, there will hopefully be a portal, a one location where everyone can engage with and share it, like as the IMA, and then act through that, sort of like a portal on Odyssey, go to our individual work as well. But support it through just sharing the different work. And if you like a point somebody makes, go donate to them directly. Even in regard to like IMA and people and stuff, it's kind of been sort of on hold because of that. And once that stops, then we have, like, I originally wanted to bring somebody on to like highlight a smaller content creator. There's lots of stuff that we talked about, but it kind of got put a pin in it until we got the portal. That's where it kind of stopped. So right now, just, support the work like we're doing, share the individuals, but I appreciate the support, guys. We all do.
Yeah. It's good to have such an active chat that's been rolling along in the background as well.
Yeah.
Thanks all you guys for watching and shout out to my chat in particular for being on your best behavior today. Good job, boys and girls.
Okay. And can I just add, Ryan, nobody ever told me there was no money in this. What am I doing here?
I'm out of here.
My agent specifically said
It was in my contract.
Right? I was supposed to at least get free tacos as part of my rider for every panel.
Just
see any
Fish and
tacos.
chips.
You're selling yourself short, Steve.
just make that the best thing about Christmas is cheese t-shirt, and that's fine. You're going to be compensated forever.
There you go.
That's true. I have a great merch guy. We'll get you hooked up.
For the comment in the chat, Iconic and the rest of them are technically part of the group. They've joined in one in the past, but they can if they want to. That's the point. Go ahead, Ian.
No, that was it. I didn't have anything else.
Oh, sorry. Whoever jumped in, go ahead. Great conversation today, guys. I really did enjoy this.
It is, yeah. Is everybody ready to go? or just no more final thoughts, because we started final thoughts like 15 minutes ago, and we're all so interesting.
I'm all out of thoughts.
Okay, well then that wraps it up. And from all of us at the IMA, have a very Merry Christmas and all the best for a new year.